Our top story this week. In Arizona, the state where the number of foster kids rose over the decade when the national numbers fell, the child protective industry is bragging about a record number of stolen kids in state care. In Australia, families are calling for a separation of the child protection and education departments. And in Canada, the Governor General is complaining about Ontario's failure to get their stolen kids adopted. In Connecticut, the DCF commissioner is defending her agency against criticism from a judge that they didn't hand over documents in a timely manner for a recent child sex abuse trial where the gay adoptive father was acquitted. In Florida, the child protective industry got a $200,000 grant to boost its child abuse prevention program, but the system sucks are complaining that it's not enough. In Massachusetts, the candidates for governor are battling over each other's child protection failures. And in Nebraska, legislative researchers are reaching out to parents who got screwed by the state's various public and private child welfare agencies. In Nevada, foster parents are bitching about the child protective industry in Clark County, while a judge creates a blue ribbon panel to study CPS failures. In Ohio, a court is seeking help with their foster care system to try to fix the problems in Ross County. And in Vermont, a child protection panel is closing in on final recommendations to reform their state system. In England, the land where families are fleeing to avoid the forced adoption system, an evil plan is devised that would charge foster kids for the cost of being snatched and kept in care. In South Carolina, the child protective industry is losing CPS agents because they can't handle all the work they throw at them. And an audit finds that in South Carolina, kids are falling through the cracks because the child protective industry is sending abuse reports to outside contractors instead of investigating them themselves. In Pennsylvania, a bill is being proposed which would keep foster kids in the same school district instead of bouncing them around from school to school. In Ohio, a study shows that thousands of students were physically restrained while at school over the last year. American doctors are accusing parents of medical child abuse for seeking a second opinion. Teen Mom 2-star Janelle Evans was reported to CPS over 50 times by fans claiming that she gave her baby a black eye after she posted a picture to Twitter. And in Nebraska, the fine folks at Lincoln School District have devised a plan to stop using gender-specific terms such as girl or boy and start calling kids purple penguins instead. In Virginia, gays were granted the right to adopt your children. In Canada, Nova Scotia is planning to formally apologize to the former residents of the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children. And in South Dakota, 2 Sioux tribes received the federal funds to create their own foster care system, which gets them out from under the mainstream child protective industry. In Australia, pediatricians are calling the mandatory detention of immigrant children child abuse, and babies as young as 11 months old are being jailed with their mothers at for-profit immigration detention centers in Texas and in New Mexico. In India, 7 juveniles flee from a government-run observation home, and in Utah, a social worker vanishes. In Canada, the province of Alberta is investigating the death of a 2-year-old in foster care. In Florida, the biological children of a man who beat his 2-year-old foster kid to death are thrown in foster care, and lacerations were found on the kid's liver. In Illinois, a foster mother is convicted of murdering her 4-year-old foster daughter. And in Pennsylvania, a mother is accused of beating, starving, feeding cat litter to, and trying to sew the mouth shut of her adopted daughter. In Idaho, a foster father was charged with raping an 11-year-old girl. In Michigan, a couple is suing after being falsely accused and persecuted for sexually abusing their autistic daughter. In Oregon, a foster father was arrested for sexually abusing a child. And in Indiana, an ex-child welfare director pleads guilty in a case where he lied to a federal grand jury regarding a high school counselor who is charged with sexually exploiting students. And in New Mexico, a judge rules that an 18-year-old is incompetent to stand trial in the death of her foster mother. In Alaska, a 16-year-old kid is charged with killing his radio host foster father, and his bail is set at $500,000. In England, a girl threatens to kill her social worker. A British social worker was arrested for texting her son who was in prison. In Connecticut, a foster parent recognizes and rats out her foster son who was a burglary suspect. And finally, tonight in Australia, an investigation finds that a surrogate baby who was left behind in India was not trafficked. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.